Death can be determined in two different ways. You can lose irreversibly all of the functions of your brain, called brain death, or you can irreversibly lose all the functions of your circulatory system, called cardiocirculatory death. The determination of death is rarely controversial, but as a bioethicist, my clinical work and research has really found its ethical pertinence in the context of organ donation. This is because organ donation is guided by an ethical standard called the dead donor rule, which states that organ retrieval can't be the cause of your death. This rule arguably protects donors from harm, but I argue that there's good ethical reasons to abandon that rule. Now, the vast majority of organs are donated after brain death. So in these cases, these patients have irreversibly lost all brain functions, but their organs are kept viable for transplantation through machines. But to increase the number of organs for transplant, since around the mid-2000s, organs have increasingly been donated after circulatory death, called DCD, which now accounts for roughly 1/4 of all organ donations in Canada. Unlike donation after brain death, organ donation after circulatory death raises a particularly thorny ethical question. How long after your heart stops should organs be retrieved such that the retrieval of your organs doesn't constitute your death, isn't the cause of your death? Also controversial is that patients who suffered a cardiac death have had their hearts successfully transplanted into other patients, which really raises the question of how irreversible that loss of function really is. And because the bodies of DCD donors need to be reperfused in order to keep the organs viable, some worry that this return of circulation could reanimate people's brain, they become conscious and experience harm. This has led to proposals to have analgesics or anesthetics administered to patients who are undergoing DCD, or to block the circulation of blood from returning to the brain during reperfusion. But it seems that doing either of those activities would suggest that the patient isn't in fact dead. So despite its promise to increase the pool of organ donors, these concerns have led many to conclude that donation after circulatory death actually violates the dead donor rule and is unethical and thus shouldn't be practiced. But in my research, I argue that so long as patients are informed of what happens with DCD, they consent to it, and are beyond harm when organ donation actually occurs, then the dead donor rule actually isn't required to protect patients from harm. In fact, if reverence to the dead donor rule is compelling health professionals to declare DCD donors dead before they've irreversibly or incontrovertibly lost the capacity to experience harm, then I actually think that the dead donor rule is not in patients' best interests. And so for these reasons, that my thesis is that while DCD should be practiced, we should bury the dead donor rule. Thank you very much.